Welcome to the Foothills, a Colorado lifestyle and real estate podcast featuring mountain home real estate broker Robert Martin, who has over 25 years of experience assisting clients reach their goals and move forward. Tune in each week for a dynamic conversation with experts, Colorado adventurers, and residents that explores the ins, outs, and specific nuances of buying the perfect mountain home or selling your dream home in Evergreen, Conifer, Bailey, and surrounding areas to catch a glimpse into the Colorado lifestyle that's a part of you.
Well, welcome to the podcast. Today we have a guest to visit about fire mitigation and some important things relating to that. Kelleigh McConnaughey with the Elk Creek Fire District. Kelleigh, welcome, and how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am a Colorado native, but I did grow up in Wyoming. And currently I am the mitigation specialist for both Elk Creek and Inner Canyon. So I am part of the combined wildland division that we have between both the fire districts. So a little bit of a background about me and kind of how I got into this field. I started 2016, I went back to school. So I started on a degree in natural resource management and conservation biology. With that degree, I was actually able to work with the State Forest Service, doing an internship within their science and data division. This field, it's one of those industries where the more people you know, the better you are. So it kind of spirals and dominoes into finding different jobs and positions. So from my internship with the State Forest Service, I was able to get a position with a nonprofit called Ember Alliance, and I was on their prescription fire module. From that job, I was actually able to meet Jason Pappenfuss, who is the wildland suppression module lead here at Elk Creek. And I was actually offered a position with them last summer. And then my position here as the Wildfire Mitigation Specialist opened up, and I was encouraged to apply. And here I am.
So one thing led to another.
Yes.
Where did you grow up in Wyoming?
I grew up in Evanston, which is pretty much the furthest southwest corner you can get in Wyoming. It is practically Utah.
Gotcha. Well, that's an area too with the winds up there too. You have to always be cognizant of those things. And I'm sure that's something that plays into any kind of force, any kind of fire, wildland fire that you guys have to address. So you decided to become a firefighter, and that one thing kind of led to another. How do you like it so far?
I love it. I couldn't beat this job. I tell people when they ask me about what I do, I tell them that I am so fortunate because I work my dream job. I couldn't ask for anything better. This has been so fantastic for me, and fire's cool. Yeah, it's really neat. Huh? So yeah.
I know if I had it to do over again, I've been a real estate broker for 28 years. I was a radio announcer early in my career. And I grew up in a small town in Kansas, and we all had volunteer fire departments. So, but when I was in the city, I may have considered become a full-time firefighter. I just think it's very intriguing, and what a great career. I have a brother-in-law who's the chief in Denver with Denver Fire. So anyway, what was it like, Kelleigh, as an intern for the Forest Service as your career developed?
It was I think a great foundation for me, honestly. With the State Forest Service, I was within their science and data. So I worked in Geographic Information Systems, which is GIS. Basically, it's a bunch of fancy words that just means mapping. With that, it's kind of the foundation of everything we do within natural resource management, fires. You have to have mapping tools and ways to combine data. So I think for me, it was really just a great foundation and a good understanding. And it was also a really great place for me to make connections. It's where I met a really good mentor who worked for the federal government with mapping and firefighting. And that's kind of how, I guess, everything for me started.
And that's kind of how you guys now, with modern firefighting, I guess, combine science along with techniques that you've known for years with the mapping. And it's pretty amazing. And what does it mean to be a wildlife or wildfire Mitigation Specialist?
I feel like the title itself, it holds a lot of weight. And I guess what I mean by that is, for me, it's not just about wildfire risk reduction, which is essentially the purpose of the position. To be a mitigation specialist, you are looking to mitigate wildfire, and that means you need to reduce the risk. You need to protect values at risk, which is usually life and property. But I think for me, the biggest thing about being a wildfire mitigation specialist is I'm an educator. I take a lot of pride, but I also carry a lot of weight in educating people about what they can do to reduce their wildfire risk and how they can protect their family, protect their home, protect this area. I mean, if we can protect what we have here, who doesn't want to see this 80 years from now? It's a beautiful place.
Oh, absolutely. And education is so very, very important. So share with people how they can help mitigate fires, and what are some of the key items when you talk with folks that, just kind of common sense things around their property and different things.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest components of protecting your home and protecting your family is really just what you do within 100 feet of your house. So making sure that you are reducing fuels, so minimizing the amount of fuels that you have in a space. And then also looking at home hardening, which is it's a hard concept to provide a blanket statement for, but minimizing the risk of ember intrusion on the home itself. And that can be something as simple as making sure that you don't have mulch surrounding your house, or a juniper bush next to your deck, or a fence that connects and leads directly to your house that's made of wood. When you're looking at the defensible space, there is a lot of great science out there. A researcher, Jack Cohen, did a lot of research and studies up in British Columbia, actually, about what you do within 100 feet of your home and how that can actually impact the house itself and the impact that wildfire can have on the home. So if you can minimize the fire intensity and the fire behavior as it approaches your home, you're not going to stop the fire, but what you can do is minimize the impact that it'll have on your house. But I think one of the biggest things that people can do is they can either, if they're in Elk Creek or Inner Canyon fire protection districts, or even Evergreen or Genesee, where the home assessment program is offered, they can get a home assessment and get a game plan on what they should do for their property. If they don't have the services that we offer here, so someone who's outside of our fire districts, finding an arborist or a forestry contractor to come in and give them defensible space recommendations. We all have to play our part. And so homeowners need to kind of take on that responsibility too.
Yeah, critically important to have a plan in place, and plus the educational process that you guys are laying out. And then you also have a program where you can do an assessment as well, correct?
Yes.
You can come out and do a home prevention assessment, or and look at it and say, give some ideas for specifics for each property.
Yes. Yeah. That program through us is called Wildfire Prepared, and I come out to someone's property and I will spend anywhere between 2, sometimes 4 hours with a homeowner, and I will give them defensible space recommendations as well as home hardening recommendations. And all of this, it's not the quick fix. You're looking at sometimes 3 to 5 years, but it's a game plan, and it's a way to minimize how overwhelming the process of mitigation can be by giving someone a step-by-step on what to do and how to do it.
So Kelleigh, do you guys know, as fire departments, which properties you may be able to put resources towards if there was a fire, some that you might have a better chance of protecting because of fire mitigation, different things that have been done ahead of time? Do you have an indication of which properties may be easier to protect or might be better suited to protect in the district? Or is that just something that if a fire were to break out, that you would look at and assess at that time?
That is definitely something more along the lines that we would assess at the time. So we call that structured triage, and it's very similar to like a medical triage situation. And it's all very time dependent. One of my favorite answers to questions when it comes to wildfire behavior, what we're doing to fight wildfire is it depends. And that's because it really does. It's going to depend on the fire behavior, where it's coming from, where it's moving. But with structured triage, essentially what we do is we have a time frame and we have an amount of structures that we know that we need to protect. And we will drive down a road. And if it makes sense for us and for our life safety as well, we will invest the time into properties to provide them a little bit more protection. And that could be something as simple as cutting a few trees and moving some vegetation to give that home a better shot. If people do more work and we show up and we can see that people have put time and energy into mitigation, it just makes that process easier for us, and it makes it easier and more effective for us to be able to apply our own tactics to protecting that structure.
Yeah, it is a team sport, isn't it? I mean, it's, living up here, over a period of time, we've been through a few wildfires, unfortunately, and we haven't had any too close, but recently we've had a few fairly close. But it comes down to educating and, knowing that we're going to work together and not saying, oh, they're going to come and protect me. Well, there's a lot more to it than that, for sure.
Yes.
So what should people consider? Let's say I was coming to you, Kelleigh, and I said, hey, I'm new to the area. I'm considering buying a home in the foothills. When it comes to wildfires and buying a mountain home, what advice would you give or suggestions?
I would say, especially to a new resident, so maybe someone who's moving from the plains into the mountains and into the foothills, I think the best advice for a new homeowner in the mountains is you need to be a good steward of the land. And what that means to me is you've got your property down in Denver and you take care of your yard and you maintain your home and you take pride in that. As soon as you move into the mountains, your maintenance goes from a well-manicured yard to probably 5+ acres of property. And people don't always have the understanding that they're now responsible for all of that forested property that they own. And it can be a big lift sometimes, but you need to take responsibility for that land and for that space. And every inch of your land needs to be well taken care of. And that's not only going to impact your wildfire risk, but it also helps with forest health. So if people start putting their time into managing whatever property they have, as well as maintaining their home, we can have good forest health impacts as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, to taking responsibility for that property. I like your analogy of taking care of your lawn in the city, and it's a little bit different up here,
Yes.
just because of, it could be a larger parcel and there's a lot to do there. That's a really good point.
Yeah. People need to switch their lawnmower for a chainsaw when they move up here.
For sure. Lots of other things too. So when, have you seen any changes with the climate change and how it's changed the fire season in Colorado? Are there any correlations in your opinion?
I would say, so the climate change question is very multifaceted. So it is not just climate change that I think is truly impacting the changes that we're seeing in fire. What climate change is doing, it is moving species and moving vegetation. So we are seeing species migration to different areas that we normally wouldn't see it. But I think it is this compounding problem that we're seeing overall. We have over 100 years of suppression policy that has led to overcrowded, mismanaged forests. We have a lot of funding that's not always going into mitigation, so we don't have as much land management as we need. And then you add I guess these are all human components, but then you add the human component of now you have people living in these areas. So you have what we call the wildland urban interface, the WUI. So now you've integrated people. And then on top of that, we are now sitting on the long end of a 10-year drought. And I think all of these issues are just compounding into now we're seeing these mega fires, but these mega fires are almost becoming common. It's the new normal. And as much as climate change is impacting fires, I think we need to look at all of the other factors as well that we're contributing to. I mean, all of this is kind of human influenced.
Yeah, for sure. There's, I know there's grants available, Kelly, for fire mitigation. Are there certain places people can go for those? I mean, let's say you had an opportunity to have maybe a 10-acre parcel mitigated or have some assistance with funds to do that, as the cost can be, quite high. Different places to go? Is it to the state organizations, or where can people go possibly look for some possible grant opportunities?
I would say with grants, it kind of gets into a little bit of a gray area. Grant funding is not always as cut and dry as I think most people think that it is. So even if someone has 10 acres, usually with grants, they start at the federal level. So you're going to have a huge chunk of money, and that grant is going to then move into stakeholder hands, essentially. And then the state distributes that to counties and local government. And from there, really what they look at is this larger scale land management. So if you just have 10 acres, it's really not as easy to obtain a mitigation grant. So what they're really looking for is, what can we do at a larger scale? And that's how they want to apply this grant funding. Honestly, within the state and within the county, they're usually looking for 50 or more acres. So if you have neighbors and you can kind of work together with your neighbors to create a larger space where people can put that funding into, that's a much better option. I do know that there is, I believe it's called Income 65. That is a income tax break through the state that people who, if they've mitigated their property, they can apply to that while they're doing their taxes, and it's a $2,500 tax credit. But yeah, grant funding can get very tricky, especially if you're doing it at a private level. There's a lot more that goes into it than I think people understand, and they can bite off a little bit more than they can chew sometimes.
Yeah. Complicated process, but it sounds like you could potentially integrate lots together. Maybe a subdivision could say, hey, we've got 20 2-acre parcels or something like that. So I know I've seen that in different subdivisions do that type of stuff. So
I think a really good takeaway for grants is have a project and then look for the money. Don't look for money and then try to come up with a plan, because grant planning can take years sometimes. So if you come to an agency or a stakeholder with a plan in place, they're more likely to say, oh, that makes sense, we can apply money to it, as opposed to saying, hey, we would like some money, and then we'll figure out how to spend it.
Gotcha. Yeah, have a plan in place before you ask for the money. There you go.
Absolutely.
So you work in a field, Kelly, that is dominated by men. What advice do you have for women who want to fight fires?
Gosh, do it. Just get into it. Oh my gosh, this is such a fun thing to do. I would say, I got some really good advice. And honestly, getting into this field, all of my mentors were men, but I got some pretty good advice from a senior firefighter of mine when I really first started getting into it. And it was just train harder and come with your A game and prove yourself. And that's for both men and women in this field, though. When you get started with a crew and when you get into fire, everyone kind of has to pay their dues and prove themselves. And, being a 5'5" on a good day with a bunch of guys who have, they're 6 foot something, and, it does take a lot to keep up with them, but there's not a lot of things that are more empowering than being able to keep up with a bunch of young guys in their 20s when I'm in my early 30s and I can keep up with them. I would also say, though, having some thick skin. This is definitely, it's definitely a field that you can't take things to heart. You can't take things seriously, but the relationships you build, I mean, these are my brothers. It's my fire family, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But it's being a woman.
You have to have a thick skin, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. But being a woman in this field, it's empowering. It's I take a lot of pride in it, and I encourage any woman who wants to get into a male dominated field, do it, because if you can find the right people to support you, possibilities are really endless.
Plus, you prove yourself. You do,
Yeah.
you do what you do, and you become one of the tribe, so to speak.
Yes.
And you're accepted and ribbed, and that's just the way it is. So that's
Oh, yeah.
wonderful. That's great. So the podcast is also about Colorado lifestyles. What types of things, Kelleigh, do you like to participate in that you really enjoy doing by living here in Colorado?
Yeah, gosh, I feel like it's so stereotypical because this is everyone's answer, but I love to hike and camp.
Yeah, I do too.
I've tried to get into hunting a little bit, but it can be a little difficult sometimes, just time-wise. But I do like to competitive shoot every once in a while. So I've gotten into shooting. I've been doing that for a few years. Really just spending as much time as I can outside, even though that's what I do for work, it never gets old for me. I feel like I could spend my entire life and find something new, and it will never get tiring in this state. There's always something to do.
Yeah, I hear that so often. We just kind of become a part of being outdoors, whether you like to hike or whether you like to mountain bike or ski or fly fish or whatever it is. There's just so much to do. And it's a matter of also just stepping back and enjoying, the outdoors, because we live amongst, so many things to do. And so, yeah, that's wonderful. Is there anything that I didn't bring up that you'd like to add?
I think the only thing that I think that maybe wasn't really hit on is we as a nation and as a generation, I think it's really important to know that we can't do all of this on our own when it comes to repairing some of the damage that we've done to our forests. It's a group effort, and it has to start small. It has to start at that private landowner level, and it needs to slowly radiate out from there. We are all working on it in different capacities. So at local government, we're working at a little bit larger projects, but I think we can't do this alone. It has to be this big consolidated effort between everybody, and that's how we're going to make the most impact. But it's really important that we all work together, because without everyone playing a part, it's going to make the process of mitigation and restoring our forests, it's going to make it pretty difficult.
Yeah, that's a great point. My wife and I oftentimes comment on a property that's been mitigated and how it looks so beautiful, like a park-like setting. And but it kind of puts the ball in everybody's court. Everybody's got a little bit of mitigation to do, or at least give it some thought and know what we can contribute. That's a good point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So where can people go to learn more about you and what you do, and also the fire programs that you guys offer?
Yeah, so either Elk Creek or Intercanyon, if you go to either of their websites, there is a tab that you can select on both websites. It just says Wildland, and that will take you to the combined Wildland Division website. There's a ton of great resources in there. You can see everyone who works for the Wildland Division, and then you can also see the different programs and services that we have to offer between the two districts. That would include the home assessment program, also the community ambassador program that I facilitate. And that's essentially finding people within your neighborhood and your community who are involved with the fire district. And it's a good way to find information about your specific neighborhood. But that's, really all the information that you might want to find from the fire protection districts can be on that Wildland page.
Well, that's great. A great resource. And we really appreciate your time today, Kelleigh. Some wonderful information you shared today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really great to be a part of this. So,
well, thanks so much for being here today. To the Foothills, a Colorado lifestyle and real estate podcast. On the podcast, I interview real estate experts, Colorado adventurers, and residents who enjoy the serenity and lifestyle of living in our mountain communities. Tune in each week for a conversation that explores the ins and outs of buying the perfect mountain home or selling your dream home, and catch a glimpse into the Colorado lifestyle that's a part of you.